So I think that's actually Joe Rogan that you mentioned before. He's always say that his favorite people in the world are people who went through major difficulties. Yeah. But then we spend all our life to try to make our kids have these perfectly wonderful lives. Basically, they're not going to be our friends when they grow up. You know, like our favorite people are the people that went through all the difficulties, because it gives so much character to somebody to like when you go through that stuff. One
of my favorite quotes is from someone you know well, Dr. Akiva Perlman. He said here on this program, he said, I'm quoting your brother in front of you, your younger brother. He said that some of the most beautiful people he knows are some of the most wounded people he knows.
Right.
I think that's special.
Well, I actually, just for homework to come on this, I was like, oh my God, I better watch a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
I didn't get through a couple of episodes, but I like scanned around. And you had Joey like
Rosenfeld
2 years ago or something, a while ago. And he said, he quoted the Kutzker where he said that the most, I forgot the quote, but it was the most full heart is a broken heart.
Yeah, there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you?
Well, right.
For our Hebrew listeners.
Yeah. Well, actually, that could help me segue into like a little bit more of like what I'm doing now.
Yeah, for sure.
Is because a lot of times we're trying to take something that's normal and pathologize it and turn it into something not normal. Like everybody's like, oh, you work with addiction. That's wild. You know, like, you know, how can you explain addiction? And when I explain addiction to people, they're like, oh, that's me. And that's everybody. I don't think I can explain addiction to somebody without them saying, oh, I totally get that.
So explain addiction.
So I'll explain it. What I was saying is that we have this idea of a perfect life. We have a perfect life, and that's what we could have, and it doesn't really exist. But the best way I explain addiction, and my like goal in life is to like be more like Rashi than Taisus. You know, like Rashi like tries to take everything complicated and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah,
and that's like my goal. Like if I could use less fancy words. You know, it makes me look a little dumber, but
I think Momo was the opposite.
Oh yes,
right. I know the fancy words. I skip the fancy words to try to make it as simple as possible. But the best way I can describe addiction to anybody is that inside us we have what we call self-esteem, which is our ability to cope with the world. And I could get further into self-esteem, but the idea is that life happens, and then we have to deal with it. So we have it inside. When we don't have it inside, we can't deal with the coping. We have to use something from the outside. So, you know, like some people, you know, like they'll watch Netflix for 5 hours a night just to heal, just to deal with the difficulties. The more you have inside to deal with your stuff, that's less addiction you have. The less you have inside, the more you have to use an external self-esteem, which is what I call it. So like take an outside self-esteem and I am borrowing esteem from the world. The less I have inside, the more I have to borrow from the outside. So we're all trying to cope with the world and make the world work for us. But we need to either use the outside or use our inside. That's the whole thing with addiction, because an addict is someone who has nothing inside, and they will spend their days being addicted to alcohol, drugs, behaviors, all these things, and every time it's like, I'm only addicted to alcohol. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Addicts are addicts.
It's like a personality. It's like a...
I think if you wanted to classify addiction properly, it would be closer to a personality disorder than it would be to any other pathology.
And you think everyone has addiction?
I think that addiction is a spectrum, and we're all on it. So the healthiest person in the world will never, like, you know, they say what the healthiest, this is like Chassidus Shemai. So like, what's the healthiest? If someone gives you a compliment or an insult and you feel the same way. You know, I don't know if you ever heard that.
I never did. That's
okay. So like someone who has a perfect self-esteem and is fully understands that they are worthy of this world, you can't hurt them. Like you can't say something that's going to hurt them.
That's healthy?
That's the healthiest self-esteem you could have. I'm not saying you want to hang out with that person. You don't.
Why?
Those guys are so annoying.
They're just not fun.
They're not fun. They're totally self-contained. They're
corporate.
Great. They're almost as bad as hanging out with the full-blown addicts. It's like, oh gosh.
Saying it's two extremes, yeah.
It's very, very extreme. But the highest level you could get is that I am so worthy that nothing could bother me. I just can't get bothered. So you could get to that level. Or you could get to, I am so not worthy, I have nothing inside, that every single thing literally tears me to shreds and I can't function at all. Like the pain is unbearable and I can't deal. The core of all addiction is the deep belief that I am essentially unworthy. That is the core. Now, everybody fits on that spectrum somewhere. Like my goal in life is to be like 70-30. Like if I could get a 70-30 day, I'm very happy. Like I'm feeling more secure about myself that I don't need to borrow so much. I don't need to walk into a room and make everybody happy with me. Like, you know, an addict, this is one of the examples of an addict, is they'll walk into a room, there's 20 people, 19 of them will think they're awesome. The one person will be like, I don't like you so much. That'll ruin their day.
Sounds like Haman HaRasha.
Haman HaRasha. Why?
Kol zeh einena shavali, because
Mordechai didn't bow down.
Right, one guy.
One guy wouldn't bow down.
He was an addict.
That's addiction.
Really? I never heard addiction explained like that.
It's a very different approach to addiction because I'm watching, first of all, the addiction community is like, there's a magical thing, addiction. Like this guy has addiction and this guy doesn't. But then I'm finding people all over the spectrum. So I get a full-blown addict. A full-blown addict will have like he'll be living on the street on Skid Row. Quote, it's your
LA reference.
I just
how's my LA pride right now?
There you go.
On Skid Row.
Skid Row, which by the way, most of LA is Skid Row right now. But okay, Skid Row. You're living on Skid Row and you have no way to function, and all you gotta do is find that next drug, or you know, you literally have nothing in you. That's a full-blown addict. But then I have people who are living their lives, they're fine, and then for some reason they're going off and cheating on their wife 3 times a week. Like, why do you need that? Like, what's happening? Now he has a job, he has his thing, he's doing all this stuff, and like, there's something in him that is so incomplete that he has to do something. I mean, I don't know if this is a podcast I could say that in, but I'm saying,
just did.
I just did. It's too late. It's too late. I should have asked you before.
No, it's all good.
But what I'm saying is that we are all there. Like when there are nights where I'm like so wiped out from work and I start a show on Netflix and I finish it. It's like 5 in the morning. I'm looking outside. I'm like,
not the episode.
I need to check myself into the rehab, you know, like the season. I'm not talking about it. You know, like that's happened. And I'm like, wow, my insides were really empty. But I'm not going to go and shoot heroin on the corner and throw out my whole life.
That would be empty. Then it'd be emptier.
That's much more empty. So what I'm saying is like, how does it make sense that you have people all over the spectrum, but there's like a special thing addict?
How do you make sure you don't get so empty?
So that's okay. So that's a secret.